Welcome to section 12.9. This is the 135th session of the CISSP exam prep series. In this session, we'll get inside the switch and the segments it creates. What are the core jobs a switch performs? What is a virtual LAN and how does it isolate traffic? How can a switch be used to eavesdrop? How do trunk ports stretch segments and where do they get abused? And what attacks target the switch itself? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because the switch is the quiet workhorse that decides who hears what on your network. Picture a shared office building where every tenant plugs into the same wiring closet. Configure the switch well and each tenant stays in their own lane. Configure it poorly and one curious tenant sniffs everyone's traffic. On the job, these settings are where segmentation either holds or quietly fails. What are the core jobs a switch performs? A switch is the everyday device that moves frames, operating mainly at layer 2. An unmanaged one has no settings, while a managed one gives you real control. It runs on 4 simple actions. Learning, where it records which device sits on which port in a memory table. Forwarding, where it sends a frame straight to the right port. Dropping, where it discards a frame that is already on the correct segment. And flooding, where an unknown destination goes out every port in hopes of reaching home. Think of it as a mail sorter that memorizes each desk as letters arrive. What is a virtual LAN? A virtual LAN, or VLAN, is network segmentation the switch creates in hardware. Every port starts in one default group, but the administrator can reassign ports to carve the switch into separate zones. You can also group by device address, subnet, protocol, or authentication. The most common use is separating ordinary user traffic from management traffic. Picture a large open office where movable partitions let you regroup desks into teams without ever moving the walls. Why do VLANs isolate traffic so effectively? Because a VLAN is a true boundary, and devices in the same VLAN talk freely while crossing between VLANs demands a routing step. That routing can come from an external router or from the switch's own higher layer software, which is why you hear the terms layer 3 switch and multi-layer switch. VLANs act like subnets, but are not subnets. The guiding rule is deny by default and allow by exception. If 2 segments have no work reason to talk, they should not be able to. VLANs also tame broadcast traffic, since the routing function refuses to forward layer 2 broadcasts between VLANs, which helps stop a broadcast storm, that flood of unwanted broadcast noise. What is port isolation? Port isolation, sometimes called private ports, is a tighter twist on the VLAN idea. Members of an isolated VLAN can only talk to each other and reach the outside world through one reserved uplink port. A hotel is the classic example. Each room's jacks sit on their own isolated VLAN, so devices in the same room can share files, but a guest in one room cannot reach a device in another. Everyone still gets a shared path out to the internet through that single uplink. How can a switch itself be used to eavesdrop? Through 2 legitimate features that also enable snooping. A port mirror copies the traffic from one or more ports out to a chosen monitoring port, and a dedicated version of this is often called a span port. Security teams use mirroring for traffic analysis, packet capture, evidence collection, and intrusion detection. When mirroring is not available, a port tap does the job physically. You break into a cable, insert the tap in line, and it quietly copies whatever passes. Think of a port mirror as a wire tap the switch offers on purpose, and a tap as one you splice into the line yourself. How do trunk ports stretch a VLAN across switches? When you run out of ports, you link switches together through trunk ports, which are high-capacity connections built for switch-to-switch traffic. A trunk lets a VLAN defined on one switch extend across several others, so the same segment can span the whole building. This works through VLAN tagging, a standard that inserts a small tag into the Ethernet header marking which VLAN a frame belongs to. Only a switch reading a trunk port understands that tag. Picture color-coded luggage tags that let bags from many flights ride the same conveyor and still reach the right carousel. How do attackers abuse VLAN tagging? Through an attack called VLAN hopping. An attacker crafts a frame carrying 2 tags stacked together instead of 1. On older switches, reading the first tag into memory got overwritten by the second, so only the inner tag survived. When the switch then forwarded the frame, it landed in a VLAN the attacker was never supposed to reach, jumping the boundary you built. The lesson is that a segmentation feature is only as strong as the switch enforcing it, so double tagging protections matter. What is a MAC flooding attack? It abuses the switch's learning function on purpose. The attacker floods the switch with frames carrying thousands of fake source addresses, and the switch dutifully tries to store each one in its address table. That table has limited space, so once it fills, older entries fall out and it can no longer forward traffic properly. In that state, the switch gives up and reverts to flooding, behaving like a simple hub and copying every frame out every port. Now the attacker, and everyone else, receives copies of the traffic and can eavesdrop at will. The defense is address limiting, which caps how many addresses each port may register, backed by an intrusion detection system watching for the flood. What is MAC cloning? Every device is supposed to carry a unique hardware address, and two identical ones on the same segment cause a conflict. But that address is easy to change in software, so an attacker can watch the network, note an address already in use, and spoof it onto their own machine. This lets them impersonate a trusted device to slip past port security or address filtering, the control that only admits devices on an approved list. Your countermeasures are smart switches and an intrusion detection system that flag odd address behavior, plus a maintained inventory of every device and its real address so a rogue one stands out immediately. So let's bring it together. A switch runs on 4 actions: learning, forwarding, dropping, and flooding. And a managed one lets you build VLANs. VLANs and port isolation segment traffic under deny by default, while port mirrors and taps let you watch it. Trunk ports and VLAN tagging stretch segments across switches, but tagging opens the door to VLAN hopping. MAC flooding forces a switch into hub-like flooding, and MAC cloning impersonates trusted devices. Lock these down with address limiting, filtering, and a solid inventory. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on rucloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session.